You may remember this clip from last week of a Palestinian man interrupting a speech by Angela Rayner.
Thanks, Johnny. And look, Thameside's going to save the world. That's why us three are up here. But
the change in this country has come when you take a place and asking and demanding for ceasefire. I lost my family in Gaza. Just a second, I want to show you my mom. I lost my family in Gaza. If the ceasefire taking place,
I just say, family. What kind of family is that?
I lose my member. I need my mom. That's the only thing I need.
Where's your voice,
Let me finish. I need my mom. Why are you not demanding for the ceasefire?
So that was Angela Rayner doing nothing as a man whose family were killed in Gaza was wrestled out of a room. So holding up pictures of his family who'd been killed, wrestled out of the room. She does nothing. And it turns out that Angela Rayner has in fact met the man in question. So the man who was dragged out, she had met him on a previous occasion. Now, Owen Jones tweeted this because he interviewed the gentleman in question. He tweets, in 2019, Angela Rayner met Dalal al-Nader when she visited his shop. She told him, "I support Palestine. Palestine must be free." Owen says now she just stands there as he's dragged out of her meeting after his family were butchered in a Labour-backed onslaught. These are just terrible, terrible people, right? You've got someone who, in 2019, as a different leadership of the Labour Party, she goes and meets a Palestinian guy. "I support Palestine. Palestine must be free." Then in this guy's darkest hour, right, his family have been killed in Gaza. She, isn't talking anything, you never hear Angela Rayner talking about Palestine must be free in, a time when it's incredibly relevant to do so. But this guy, who when it was easy for her, she was very happy to embrace Palestine must be free. Now he holds up pictures of his family who've been killed by Israel, and she just stands there as security guards drag him out of a room while he's holding up pictures of his dead family. Completely, completely appalling, and Angela Rayner should be ashamed. Angela Rayner has appeared on Good Morning Britain, and she was asked about last week's protest for a ceasefire at a Labour fundraising event.
On Friday, you were driven away in a police car after you and your colleague, Jonathan Reynolds, confronted by pro-Palestine supporters and campaigners. The groups heard "shame on you" chanting. You'd been at a fundraising dinner in Stockport. That event was interrupted. And a woman was filmed shouting, "What kind of feminist are you? 15,000 women and children dead, and you tout yourself a modern-day feminist." There is strong feeling, isn't there?
And I understand that strong feeling. I would do everything I possibly could to stop what's happening in the Middle East.
On a ceasefire,
but that is not going to stop. Realistically, what we're trying to do at the moment is bring about a ceasefire, bring about the release of those hostages, and bring about a two-state solution for that area. I would give everything to make that happen. I'm a mother myself. I've been, looking at what's happening in that region for many decades as a trade unionist, let alone as a member of Parliament. I would do whatever it takes to get to that position. We are trying to do that. And in fairness, every single member of Parliament wants to see that. I don't think there is any member of Parliament in the UK that wants to see that. Can you just explain to those protesters why you won't vote for it? Because we're trying to bring about the situation by diplomacy, by working in the region. We've met with ambassadors, we've met with Palestinian families, we've met with the Israeli ambassador, we've met with the Palestinian ambassador. You think it would be an empty gesture is what you're saying, isn't it? It's not going to make it happen.
That was the biggest piece of crap I think I've actually heard since the start of this war, because it's just absolute hot air. And, it's kind of even worse than that because it's active misinformation about the UK's role in this. Because she's sort of suggesting, to be fair, everyone in Parliament really wants this to end. They want peace. Like, you kind of have a role as, in Parliament. If she wanted to do anything for a ceasefire, she could have goddamn voted for one. But you also do have a sort of educative role. If you're an MP, you're speaking to the public, you have, I think, a responsibility to kind of explain how the world actually works, not trick people. And what's going on when it comes to the UK, run by Parliament, run by our MPs and Israel, we aren't acting for peace. We are giving Israel pretty much unconditional support. We're giving them diplomatic cover. We are helping to distract from a provisional ruling from the International Court of Justice, which said that Israel is potentially committing genocide. Right? This is Britain is deeply implicated It's not like, oh, it's too complicated. We're asking them very nicely. We might not be able to stop it, but at least we're not fueling it. No, we are fueling it, right? And Angela Rayner is actively, proactively hiding that. I think it's completely despicable. I also thought it was somewhat unfortunate. I don't want to impute motives, but sort of, I think the more powerful point that Susanna Reid could have brought out there was not what the sort of female protester was saying, but what the protester at the front was showing, which was pictures of his family who had died in Gaza, which I think is, really the most powerful part of that protest, and the most despicable element of Angela Rayner's response, which is that she sort of sat back while that guy got dragged off. Speaking of the ICJ, Angela Rayner was also asked about the provisional ruling from the World Court.
What do you think of the use of the word genocide in relation to what's going on in Gaza right now, as we speak?
Well, I think the ICJ ruling is very serious, and I think it puts the marker down. It stopped, from actually saying that's where we're at the moment. But it was very clear that the humanitarian crisis we see at the moment unfolding in Gaza for the Palestinians is really serious.
Do you think do you think there are aspects of genocide in the dictionary version of genocide?
I don't know. The ICJ is the right place for that to be determined.
Now, I'm actually going to say a half defence of what Angela Rayner said there, because I think when you're asked, is what's going on in Gaza genocide, saying I don't know is actually not a completely unreasonable answer. I'm very happy to say what's happening there is appalling. I think it's a genocide. A war, is it a genocide? I mean, I think South Africa put forward a convincing case, but I don't have certainty, right? And so I think that part of the answer wasn't completely unreasonable. But the context is Angela Rayner doesn't know if it's a genocide. Meanwhile, her colleague, right, who has said that sort of Gaza is a genocide, a completely reasonable position, was kicked out of the party for saying that, right? So kicked out of the party for saying something that Angela Rayner doesn't know whether it's true or not. If you're going to say, I don't know, then at least, say it's legitimate to say one or the other. You can't at one point say, I don't know if it's a genocide, but also it's completely illegitimate to call it a genocide. Those two positions are completely inconsistent. Helena, I mean, when it comes to the Labour Party, sort of, I do sometimes feel like I want to complain about them less because it's boring. But when it comes to Palestine, I kind of can't help it because I'm just so infuriated when I watch it. Not just because the stakes are so high, but because it's just so dishonest, right? It's not a sort of difference of opinion about whether or not, water should or shouldn't be nationalised. It's, we can see something in front of our eyes and Labour politicians are just denying it. They're lying to us.
I mean, it is basically what every single Labour Party position is at the moment. The metric is not, is this the correct and or moral and or ideological thing for us to support? It is what is most likely to win us the next election. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true. 70% of the people in the country support a ceasefire in Gaza. So I'm not even sure that their position that they're trying to take here is necessarily the correct tactical one. And I wanted to go even further on your point there when you said that I think it's fine to say that you don't know in a complex legal situation like the definition of whether what's happening is a genocide. But I was going to say, obviously there's the comments about Kate Osmore, absolutely correct. But on top of that, if you think that there's a possibility, given her own answer, that there could be a genocide going on, why are you still backing us sending arms to Israel? It doesn't make any sense at all. And on top of that, she said, well, we need to make sure that even more humanitarian aid is going in. Yet her own party's position is to support the removal of funding from UNRWA in response to allegations by Israel amongst a very tiny proportion of their members' involvement on October the 7th. My second point I wanted to make is about her comments regarding the ceasefire, saying, well, we need to get hostages free. And, us just saying a ceasefire does nothing. It's potentially performative. Well, the first step towards having a hostage deal is to ensure that the fighting stops, which means you need to have a ceasefire. I mean, regardless of what you think about him, I have very low opinions of him. But regardless, Osama Hamdan of the Hamas Politburo was doing a conference in Beirut recently, talking about the ideas of, well, we would like to see a hostage deal in response to an immediate ceasefire with international guarantees. And so there is clearly a route for calling for an immediate ceasefire so that a hostage deal can be made. And on top of that, there is already an admission amongst many people in the Israeli military that a military success in terms of removing Hamas isn't even among the cards. I mean, 80% of the Qassam Brigade's military strength is still there available. So this continued fighting, saying, well, if we just fight harder, maybe we'll get the hostages back, seems completely unreasonable at this point, and we have to have a ceasefire so that we can have a release of hostages on both sides and stop the humanitarian crisis from getting any worse.